Imagine two figures huddled in the flickering firelight of a cave, tens of thousands of years ago. No smartphones, no written language, no neatly defined cultural rules, just raw survival. Yet even then they lean into each other not simply for warmth, but for something deeper. Comfort, desire, perhaps even the first flicker of love. Why would early humans, burdened by predators, hunger, and merciless winters, choose to invest in risky, vulnerable bonds? And more importantly, what do their choices whisper about the instincts we still carry in our veins today? Picture the last ice age, glaciers stretching across continents, predators lurking at the edges of the firelight, and food so scarce that every day was a gamble between survival and starvation. In this world, intimacy wasn't a luxury, it was a lifeline. For prehistoric humans, the concept of bonding wasn't about soft emotions alone. It was forged from necessity. To face hostile conditions, small groups learned that connection, whether through physical closeness, affectionate touch, or cooperative parenting, gave them an edge that lone wanderers simply didn't have. Intimacy became a kind of insurance plan against the brutality of nature. Think about it. Infants required years of care before they could contribute to the clan's survival. Without committed bonds, those helpless little bundles would never make it. A pair that collaborated, sharing food, shelter, and protection, ensured their kin had a chance. Trust and emotional reliance weren't just nice, they directly determined whether genes successfully carried forward. But intimacy wasn't purely parental. Body language, shared rituals, and moments of physical closeness created invisible threads binding groups together. That closeness wasn't simply about reproduction, it's where we see the seeds of social trust. Imagine hunters returning shivering from a failed hunt. The warmth of another body or the reassurance of touch wasn't romantic fluff. It was fuel. It was resilience. This also shows us something profound about humanity. Vulnerability became strength. By leaning into trust rather than isolation, early humans built the cooperative systems that made survival in harsh, unstable climates possible. The fragility of tenderness, an arm wrapped around a sleeping partner, the comfort of belonging, was the very thing that helped push our species forward while other competitors fell away. In short, intimacy wasn't a bonus feature of early humanity. It was the secret weapon, deeply embedded in our instincts from the very beginning. If only caves could gossip right, they'd have endless stories of whispered alliances, fierce rivalries, and tender connections. Luckily for us, the Earth has kept fragments, bones, burial sites, artifacts that act as whispers from prehistory. One striking example comes from the discovery of ancient graves where partners were buried together, often positioned face to face or with arms intertwined. These aren't mere practical burials. They suggest a symbolic recognition of emotional bonds that lasted beyond survival. Imagine those moments, someone taking the effort to arrange bodies in a gesture of closeness. That takes time, thought, and something resembling care. Then there are cave paintings. While much of prehistoric art seems to center on animals and hunting, subtler depictions of human figures hint at shared rituals, dancing, and gatherings. These gatherings weren't just about food distribution. They likely fostered interpersonal bonds, reinforced alliances, and allowed intimate connections to flourish within the safety of a communal fire circle. Archaeologists also recognize signs of cooperative parenting, remains of children cared for beyond what one mother could provide, suggesting support networks and shared investment. A child surviving with developmental illnesses, for instance, implies that the group as a whole was invested emotionally as well as practically. That's intimacy with ripple effects. It binds not just couples but entire clans. Even bones themselves speak of intimacy, healed fractures pointing to care given by others, injuries that would have been fatal if not for another's help. For our ancestors, kindness meant survival. Every scar that healed tells a silent story. Someone stayed, someone nursed, someone valued a life enough to keep it going. Put simply, the archaeological record reveals that intimacy wasn't hidden in the shadows of caves. It's carved into the very remains of our ancestry. Each gesture of care, each woven burial or healed injury, is a breadcrumb trail leading back to the fact that love, compassion, and bonding were extras. They were cultural cornerstones, shaping how humans lived and died. Here's the paradox. In a world full of saber-toothed cats, rival clans, and the constant threat of starvation, relying too much on someone else seems foolish. What if they abandon you? What if they take your food and run? From a strictly survivalist perspective, self-sufficiency should be the ultimate strategy. And yet, our species didn't evolve that way. We leaned into trust, into care, into bonds that tied us to others. Why? Evolutionary psychology gives us the answer. The gamble of intimacy paid off. Bonds created stability. Pair-bonded partners could raise young more effectively, protect resources, and reduce the exhausting cycle of finding new mates. Vulnerability became a selective advantage because it fueled cooperation. Those who loved, trusted, and cared stood a better chance at ensuring their genetic legacy. Neurobiology reinforces this story. When we look at hormone systems, oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, they read like ancient evolutionary blueprints designed to make connection feel rewarding. Hug someone you care about and you feel calmer. Share food, and your brain lights up with the same satisfaction as capturing prey. These chemical rewards nudged prehistoric humans to keep forming relationships despite the risks. And here, where it gets fascinating, intimacy wasn't just about reproduction. Our ancestors wired themselves to yearn for companionship because it boosted survival. Loneliness, by contrast, was dangerous. It increased stress hormones, decreased immune defenses, and even raised mortality risks. In short, feeling alone could kill you faster than hunger if it meant being cut off from your tribe. So when we, in modern times, crave closeness, panic over rejection, or even suffer heartbreak, it's not weakness. It's ancient code. Our ancestors carried these instincts because they worked. Being soft was a shield, not a flaw. As humanity huddled together under the roar of the Ice Age winds, evolution quietly selected for the bravest act of all, trusting one another. And that gamble, the biology of bonding, shaped not only survival but the very definition of what it means to be human. For every tender burial or whispered gesture of comfort in prehistory, there's another truth that can't be ignored. Intimacy wasn't always soft. Alongside warmth came fire, and that fire sometimes burned. Jealousy, for instance, isn't a modern invention, it's as old as courtship itself. Imagine a small clan clustered in a cave. If resources are scarce, if partners are limited, then affection isn't just affection, it's possession, status, and potential survival. Protecting a bond could mean protecting your legacy. When another rival threatens that bond, instinct screams. That scream probably started arguments, fights, and maybe even the first forms of social policing within the group. Dominance also shaped intimacy. Prehistoric male rivals may have fought for mates, and women too used strategies to secure dependable partners who could provide and protect. Scholars point out that our ancestors weren't romantic idealists, they were strategic survivors. Intimacy was often laced with power, choosing the strongest hunter, maintaining alliances through pair bonds, or warding off competition for high-status mates. This tension reveals the double edge of intimacy. On one side, closeness was nurturing. On the other, it became territory to defend. That tug-of-war between tenderness and control hasn't left us. It simply wears modern clothes. Today it might show up as jealousy in relationships, controlling behaviors, or insecurities that spark conflict. The roots of those shadows trace straight back to the fire-lit caves where losing love could mean losing survival. But here's the twist. These primal instincts, though harsh, carried evolutionary value. They ensured that bonds weren't taken lightly. They made intimacy serious business. Jealousy may sting, but in the prehistoric world, it deterred rivals, reinforced loyalty, and guarded genetic futures. It was messy biology, sculpting human relationships long before poetry or romance novels arrived. So even at intimacy's origin, two truths coexisted. The tender pull toward connection, and the darker instinct to guard what was ours. This ancient tug shapes the emotional echoes we still feel today. When we think of prehistoric bonding, it's tempting to imagine peaceful couples hand in hand, but the archaeological and anthropological evidence paints a harsher reality. Alongside care and affection, intimacy was an arena of competition, betrayal, and sometimes violence. Take early mating rivalries. Males competed fiercely for reproductive chances, clashing over access to desirable partners. These weren't squabbles over text messages. They could turn into outright physical fights with bone clubs, teeth, and fists. Violence wasn't random. It was a strategy. It ensured that dominance determined who passed down genes, embedding aggression into the evolutionary toolkit of intimacy. But females weren't passive pawns in this story. Anthropologists point out that women developed counter-strategies, forming alliances, selectively choosing partners who demonstrated not just strength but reliability, and quietly exercising influence within group politics. In a sense, prehistoric women were the original social strategists, shaping group dynamics in ways that often went unspoken but were crucial for survival. We also see darker dynamics show up in evidence of coercion and dominance. Some skeletal remains suggest violent encounters, sometimes linked to disputes over mating rights. It may feel uncomfortable to admit, but intimacy's prehistoric stage wasn't always consensual. Desire and rivalry fueled struggles that spilled across clan lines, creating tension that reshaped entire communities. Strangely enough, these conflicts didn't just tear groups apart, they also forced inventions of structure. Rules, traditions, and unspoken codes, mate guarding, alliances, rituals, began to emerge, guiding how intimacy could unfold without constant chaos. Violence exposed the cost of unchecked desire, and out of those clashes grew the seeds of social order. So in the shadows of early intimacy, we see a paradox. Desire both bonded and divided. It protected families even as it sparked conflict. It birthed trust even as it unleashed aggression. From passionate tenderness to deadly rivalry, intimacy was always a double-edged blade. And make no mistake, we're still carrying that blade today. Fast forward from cave fires to cafe dates, and on the surface, it seems like humanity has evolved far beyond the primal struggles of our ancestors. Yet peel away the polished layers of dating apps, candle-lit dinners, and wedding hashtags, and you'll find the same instincts humming underneath. The battlefield is softer now, but the weapons are familiar. Take jealousy. Today, it shows up as overanalyzing who liked your partner's photo, or that stomach twist when an old flame reappears. These may seem trivial compared to cave fights over mates, but they spring from the same evolutionary well, a drive to guard bonds, protect investment, and secure trust. Our brains still treat rejection as a survival threat. Heartbreak literally feels like dying, not because we're dramatic, but because, ancestrally, social exclusion could have spelled death. Our hunger for connection is equally ancient. The reason loneliness gnaws at mental and physical health is that prehistoric coding still runs the show. Back then, to be alone was to be vulnerable. Today, it's less about wolves in the dark and more about invisible wolves, depression, anxiety, or a scrolling feed where everyone else looks connected except you. The pain is psychological now, but the instinct is prehistoric. Even power dynamics remain. Whether it's debates about equality in partnerships or subtle negotiations of status in friend groups, echoes of dominance and alliance strategies still ripple through us. Gender expectations, alpha behavior, and even controlling tendencies in relationships can all be traced back to strategies that once ensured or sabotaged survival. But here, where the story turns hopeful, unlike our ancestors, we have awareness. Where they reacted purely on instinct, we can pause, reflect, and rewrite the script. We inherit jealousy, desire, the craving to possess, but we also inherit compassion, tenderness, and the courage to make bonds that defy the dark. Recognizing our prehistoric wiring doesn't doom us, it frees us. Because once we see the shadows we carry, we can turn that fire toward warmth, not chaos. So here's the haunting truth we've uncovered. Intimacy has always been more than just romance or attraction. In the frozen caves of prehistory, it was a survival strategy, a tender hand reaching out in a merciless world. But right beside that warmth lurked shadows, jealousy, rivalry, and power struggles that carved themselves into our DNA. And those instincts, they never disappeared. Today's emotions, from the ache of heartbreak to the rush of falling in love, are echoes of fire-lit bonds and primal risks. Jealousy may sting over a text message. Loneliness may ache in a crowded room, but they're more than quirks of modern anxiety. They're ancient alarms, warnings carried across tens of thousands of years by ancestors who knew that connection meant survival. Yet here's the twist. Awareness is our inheritance too. Unlike our ancestors who lived at the mercy of their instincts, we can choose how to channel them. We can take the fire of passion and wield it as warmth rather than destruction. We can rewrite patterns of jealousy into trust, rivalry into cooperation, survivalism into love. Recognizing the primal shadows within us doesn't make us weaker, it makes us more human. So the next time you wonder why love feels so powerful, why rejection cuts so deep, or why trust feels fragile, remember, it's not because you're broken. It's because you're carrying the weight of survival strategies forged in the Ice Age. Your heart beats with both tenderness and shadow, and that duality is what makes intimacy so staggeringly human. If you found yourself leaning closer during this journey, curious, unsettled, maybe even recognizing pieces of yourself in those ancient caves, then stay with us. Hit subscribe, share your own reflections in the comments, and keep exploring how the past shapes the instincts we wrestle with now. Because every relationship, every heartbreak, and every spark of desire is another step in a story that began under flickering firelight and continues with us.